Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Um, Good evening, Prof. Welcome to the program this evening.
Good, good evening. I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to an exciting interaction with you and our viewers.
Thank you, Prof, for being here once again. I know it's been quite a long day for you. I caught wind of your speech on a program earlier on today, so I know it's been
Mm.
a long day. Um, But, sir, let us start the program this evening by looking at a very important issue, and that is one on climate control. The IPCC released a report, and one of the UN chiefs has referred to a code red for humanity, they call it. Prof, how do you react to the IPCC report? I know you must have seen that.
Yes, I have seen it. Um, and my summary of that report is that the earth is dying. Let us not put a gloss on that report. The earth is dying. Where the earth is in intensive care unit now, and even some of the windows of opportunity for rectifying things are already slammed shut in our face. We need to take massive remedial actions. You don't even need, see, you don't need to read the report. Just look at what is going on in the world. There are four continents that are on literally on fire. Um, the United States and Canada on the west coast, the fire is burning out of control. Europe, uh, 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 Spain, now Italy, Greece, Turkey, fires are burning out of control. It's now jumped this Mediterranean Sea into Algeria, and Algerian fire is also burning out of control. In China, you have the same thing. Now, where there is no fire, you have floods, and some of the continents are actually battered by either fire or flood or both. So nobody really needs to preach the content of that report. You could see it physically. And my fear is that that fire will continue to spread into areas that are dried up. Now, have we learned our lesson? Are we going to go into what I will call, you know, code one reaction? The answer is no. If, if with all that we know about COVID 19 um, pandemic, people are still refusing to take vaccines. They are still into denial. And this is a pandemic that has led to I don't know now whether it's 1 million deaths or more. Who says people are going to listen to the lessons to be learned from this red card that's just been given to planet Earth? So it's a pity. We as human beings, we have one deficiency. We don't learn from history. And just as we talked about COVID-19 nationalism, we are also encumbered by environmental nationalism. If somebody like Biden's environmental envoy, who was Secretary of State of the United States, he was asked, I think on a British television program, if the United States standard of living has to come down as American contribution to this environmental issue, what will be the reaction? And you know what he said? American standard of living is out of the debate. So in other words, the United States could continue to consume what it is consuming, producing the kind of energy that it is consuming, but let other countries make the sacrifice. Well, I can see the answer here. I can see every foreign minister making that same remarks. You let others make the sacrifice and not you. And coming from a medium income country, my fear is that, as usual, they will pressure the poor countries to make the sacrifice. And that will lead us to nowhere. So I'm afraid the earth is dying and we'll die with it.
Um, Prof, on that point, when we start to look at some of the things that we hold dear as the hallmarks of civilization, these are the very things that people are talking about dropping. You know, airplane travel, reduce airplane travel, go back to uh, um, a travel that's not based on some of the fuel types that we use. Um, I think that's what you're talking about when you talk about reducing or adjusting our standard of living to cope with this. But what is that going to do to not only foreign policy, um, what is that going to do to human civilization as we start to address the challenge on global warming? It's clear it's a code red, um, but how do we move away and make it easier for people?
Well, you've made reference to some of the things that we needed to do. We've got to cut down on air travel. But are we doing that? Even at the peak of the pandemic, when the American government was saying people shouldn't fly, people shouldn't travel, they still did. Millions during the public holidays. Millions still travel. And what the representative of President Biden was saying is that the American government is not going to forcibly ground airplanes. As long as there are passengers who are ready to fly, well, those planes will fly and they will add to the pollution. As long as there are people who are ready to book on those massive city ocean liners who consume fossil energy. They don't consume nuclear energy. They don't consume electrical energy. As long as there are people prepared to book on that, well, the ocean liners will continue to move. Look at the uproar. They could see the effect of these massive ocean liners on Venice. And finally, when action was taken that those ships should no longer come into the inlet of Venice Ocean, the uproar that it has caused. Oh, people's jobs will be lost. If Venice collapses tomorrow under the weight of those massive ships, will people's jobs? It's not only jobs that will be lost, lives will be lost. And yet, people are complaining people's jobs will be lost. So, I don't. You know, the selfishness that characterizes the human race. I won't blame any particular country. The human race is what is going to lead to the death of the human race. And again, we go back to one of the themes that we have covered several times. And I remember urging you perhaps to let us have a debate on democracy and development. Because as long as we have democratic culture where the vote of one Nobel Prize science winner is the same as the vote of one street cleaner. I am not saying that the street cleaner is not a human being. Of course, he's a human being. But in terms of making informed choices, informed choices about what should be our response to the challenges we are facing, then we're going to be making the wrong choices because governments don't want to be voted out of power. And so they know what to do, but they're not going to do so. They're not going to do so.
Sir, if we look at the response from, let's look at Africa, and I will generalize there so we don't pick on individual countries. But what is the African response like to this from a governmental
We are
perspective
not,
now?
yes, we are not the culprits here. The contribution of Africa to the degradation of the environment is minimal. We are not the one consuming fossil energy compared to China, compared to the United States, compared to Europe because we still have developing economies. We are not. So to that extent, I simply just hope that African representatives in these environmental conferences will not allow them to heap this victim upon us. And to that extent, start asking the village woman who in one day, the village woman probably uses 6 sticks of firewood to cook, and the total smoke she contributes to the atmosphere is not up to the car put on the road for 1 hour to go to somebody's office in Europe. And yet, she will then be told Africa is using firewood, we are cutting down trees. And in any case, even the trees that are being cut down is the developed countries that are shipping those trees out. There is evidence where those they go to China, they go to Europe, and if developed countries will help Africa to, number one, cut the export. These trees cut the export, but it's not just a question of cutting the export. But if say country X in Africa is making $20 million from export of those goods illegally, then if you are going to help country X to stop the illegal export of those woods, you must compensate them. So there must be a fund domiciled, I don't know where, the UN or some environmental agency, that to say, well, in exchange for helping to stop the illegal export of these woods, here is your $20 million that will earn to then help to maybe repopulate your forest land and also move away from fossil fuel factories to other factories that are dependent on other things. It's got to be well thought out. It's got to be global, and it's not just a question of saying you must stop doing this when we need the money generated by these illegal exports.
Thank you for that, sir. Um, Last week I asked you a question, and this was in relation to Afghanistan. And you said to me, you keep asking me about Afghanistan. Uh, I'm sure you're going to ask me again, and I'm going to give you the same answer. But I think, sir, there's quite a lot that has happened and has happened in Afghanistan since last week. You spoke and you said that we are likely to see the government fall as quickly as possible. At the time, Russia was saying this is not going to happen very quickly. The Taliban were going to run out of steam. And it seems like they are gaining ground. Prof, what do you have to say about the developments in the last 2, 3 days in Afghanistan?
I, I, I'm saying to you, I'm not going to give you the same answer. I was wrong. last week and the week before then, in terms of my time frame, things have moved so rapidly that I don't think anybody could have imagined the collapse. And that's what it is. The collapse of the Afghanistan army. That is assuming that they even had a national army to start with. Afghanistan will be the first country that I will know that has a modern air force, that American have trained their pilots and have given them not the top of the range of Air Force planes, but Air Force planes that could inflict damage on the enemy. The Taliban has no air force, and yet the Taliban is driving the so-called national army off the field. Where is the Afghan Air Force? To some extent, I feel sorry for the Afghan government in only one limited sense, that the tactics of the Taliban is to embed themselves into civilian areas. If the Air Force goes into those areas, the Western press will be the first one to scream about the Afghan government bombing civilians. They've got to find something that will make headline news. They will ignore the fact that the Taliban forces have embedded themselves amongst civilians. Now, but whichever way you look at it, the government is losing the battle. And I could see the refugees flooding into Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. You know, what I suspect will even happen is that Kabul will implode, because I could see the anger with which those refugees were talking, that the government has not provided for them. Everybody is rushing towards Kabul, forgetting that Kabul itself doesn't know what to do to even protect itself. When everybody floods in, you may simply have an implosion. And the last time I saw that happen was in Iran during the last days of the Shah of Iran, when the street demonstrations got so much out of hand that the policemen started throwing off their uniform, their guns, and joining the demonstrators, until the Shah's regime simply collapsed and the Shah flew out. That I could see traces of that already happening in Kabul. So, but I must continue to say this, and I think the Americans are quite right to say this. We were there for 20 years. We spent a lot of money training your forces. It's time for us to get out, and for you to either decide to defend your country and get your country back from the Taliban, or, well, you take the consequences of the Taliban taking over your country. I feel sorry for the Afghans, civilians, because from what we are hearing, the Taliban commanders say in the field, it is not going to be Christmas in Kabul. People are saying it's going to be a Sharia-run government. So if you want to see what is going to happen in Afghanistan, look at Iran, not Pakistan.
So, 2 points you've raised there that I'd like to get your views on. The first one um, is the kind of government that the Taliban is trying to put in place. One of the mayors of their cities has said, in response to a question, he was asked, "What exactly is it that you're fighting for?" And he said, "This is an Islamic war. We're not going to stop until we see Islamic law entrenched in the fabric of Afghanistan." How do you legislate, or how do you deal with that sort of thinking in a diplomatic way?
You can't. That's why I said, if you want to know what's going to happen in Afghanistan, look at Iran. The laws are going to be based on the Quran. I don't know whether we are talking about the same interview, but I saw an interview where, again, one of the commanders, who is now the Taliban governor of a province, who said, if you steal, we cut off your hands. If you commit adultery, we stone you to death. That is what the Quran says, and we are going to have governance by the Quran. So there is no, you see, what is happening in Doha, the diplomatic conference happening in Doha, and what is happening on the field are two totally different things. The Taliban will continue to talk in Doha and procrastinate to allow the Taliban field commanders and foot soldiers to make as much gain as possible. And I would like to put it to you that it's only, anyway, the news will come out, nothing is ever hidden. By next week, high government officials of Afghanistan are going to be sending members of their family out. They are going to be sending members of their family out to Europe or to Turkey or India or even not Pakistan. That will be an indication to you of when the implosion will take place.
There was another point you raised, that I want to also call out a little bit. You've talked about Pakistan there. There is a, a hashtag that has gone viral, and this is where Afghans have been talking about sanctioning Pakistan for effectively Pakistan just standing on the sidelines and not really helping in this war. What is it that Pakistan can do in this situation?
Well, Pakistan is not standing on the sideline. Pakistan is effectively supporting the Taliban. What people don't realize is that the in Pakistan, the name Pakistan, the PA there stands for Pashtun, which is an ethnic or a tribal or a national group, whatever you want to call it, who form the majority in Pakistan. The same Pashtun people form the majority of the Taliban in Afghanistan. So in ISIS, which is the secret service army of Pakistan, in supporting the Taliban, in effect also they are supporting that Pashtun majority in Pakistan. And what may be the ultimate effect of the Taliban victory in Afghanistan may in fact be the creation of a Pashtun nation that carves out the majority Pashtun in Pakistan with the Taliban in Afghanistan. So Pakistan is not officially, the government says it is neutral. And it tells the Americans that in fact they are supporting the American effort. But the most powerful force in Pakistan is their military intelligence army, which also controls who even rules Pakistan. And that military intelligence army is fully in support of the Taliban. So they are not going to help. They are not going to help the civilian government in Afghanistan at all.
One area we've seen a fallout, and I'll ask this before we leave the topic on Afghanistan, is the EU and their response to the refugee situation. The talks about having a united front have all but broken down. I think it was in Greece where they have outright said, "Look, this is a problem." And we're starting to see the fracture within the European Union on how to address deportation of refugees back to Afghanistan because of the situation there. Yet, other European countries are odds in terms of how do you deal with all the refugees that may now be coming into Europe as a result of the conflict that's going on in Afghanistan. What do you have to say about that, sir?
Well, I would say factor in another element. The United States says Afghans who have helped not the forces, but the NGOs, the media, or who have helped the armed forces, but not for sufficient length of time to qualify for repatriation straight to the United States, that they are encouraging them by their own means to go into Turkey, and that from Turkey they will then process their visa applications to the United States. Now that's nonsense. That's nonsense. Why Turkey? Who says that Turkey wants them? Who says that Turkey can handle, has the infrastructure to handle an influx of refugees from Afghanistan? If the United States really wants to pick these people, the United States, United States must be more than 10 times the size of Turkey. You could fly them overnight. But no, you are asking Turkey to take on that responsibility. And Turkey already has her own problems in terms of the war going on in Syria and what have you. The EU is caught in this human rights syndrome. European civilization is based on human rights. Therefore, we must demonstrate a willingness to take in refugees. But they are now confronted with refugees who are coming in a quantity that is posing a problem for integration. The refugees, in any case, don't want to be integrated. They don't want to be Europeans. They want to maintain their identity and their culture as Muslims. And this is creating problems in Britain, in France, in Greece, in Italy. So why would this, and in Germany, and this is what has led to a swing to the right in Europe over the past 2 to 3 years. Why would they want to take in more when they have not been able to solve the problem of the number of Muslim refugees that they already have? There is a report that is out that shows that when ISIS formed its caliphate in Iraq, most of their foot soldiers who came from the outside did not come from Muslim countries. They came from Muslims in Europe, resident in Europe. Those foot soldiers, the ISIS foot soldiers, who went there to embrace ISIS, came from Europe. So why would Europe want to take in more when they haven't fashioned out how their society will cope with people of a different culture, of a different religion, of a different set of values? So that is the problem that Europe faces.
So let's move to the United States. That's a key point that was raised earlier on this week from the White House. And this is the announcement that US President Biden will be convening what they've called a summit for democracy, is what they've referred to it as. And earlier on in this program, you brought it up again, this issue about development versus democracy. Now we see the United States saying, hey, let's have a conversation about democracy. What would you expect to see on the agenda of such a summit?
The first question I will ask you is, isn't this another attempt at building an anti-China, anti-Russian, an anti-whoever is not a democratic coalition? Is this not doing that through the back door? And what do we intend to gain out of that? Democracy as a form of government is under pressure, frankly, in all the countries in the world, including the United States itself. Under Trump, we saw what almost amounted, in fact, it amounted to an attempted coup. From what is coming out now, that we are now hearing about, is pressure on the Justice Department. I mean, the pressure by Trump on the Justice Department in order to subvert that department. Democracy itself is not safe in the United States. Not to now talk about not to now talk about democracy being under siege from developmental problems. So I'm not even talking about Russia or talking about China now. How many countries in Africa really have free and fair elections? And in how many countries in Africa are democratic elections subverted by actions by Western countries interfering in those elections in order to get their own preferred candidate? So, from that conference that he's planning, number one, are you going to get a commitment by European countries not to interfere in free and fair elections in Africa? Number one. Number two, are you going to get a commitment from Western countries to strengthen the capacity of African countries to conduct free and fair elections and accept free and fair elections? Are you going to get that commitment from them? Number three, are you going to insist that in terms of financial and economic relationship, African countries should choose between the United States or between Western countries and the Chinese and the Russian? Have they thought out all of these things? Have they thought out what they expect this conference on democracy to lead to? Or is this just, it sounds nice to have a conference on democracy? And are they confusing the term democracy with Western civilization? So if you embrace democracy, you must embrace Western civilization. You see, it's problematic to me as a scholar having a conference on democracy. It is problematic to me.
Thank you for that. Before we leave the United States and move to Africa, there's a question I want to put to you. And again, this week, the U.S. Justice Department is taking a fresh look at some of the secret papers relating to the 9/11 attack on the United States, and they've been given the go ahead to review the documents to see to what extent Saudi Arabia might be culpable in what happened. What is your take on this? Is it something the United States should be opening up again for review, or is it something that it's just a cosmetic activity here?
No, you've put your finger on it. It's just going to be cosmetic activity. Till today, there are still papers dealing with the Kennedy assassination. that have not been fully open to public scrutiny. There was a Warren Commission set up under Lyndon Johnson the week after the assassination. The Congress, the Congress had set up congressional um, investigative panels, and they came up with a report, but government papers made available to them had pages blanked out, and on the grounds of national security, they haven't been given access to all the papers. So on this 9/11, yes, every president who comes in takes a look at the papers and decides, no, on national security grounds, we're not going to have a release 100% of these documents. Recall that last week we were talking about the role of the deep state. That deep state, which is made up of the intelligence community, all the documents. And a president is usually guided by the advice of the intelligence community that this is not going to be good for America. It is not in the national interest of America for these documents to be released. And a president is usually guided. They know more than he knows anyway. It's usually guided by their advice. And in order to satisfy the public, they may say, okay, can't we release maybe another 50 pages, but hide 2,500 pages? And they will claim that, this we can make available, but all these others we cannot make available on national security grounds. You see, that term, national security grounds, you could commit genocide and get away with it. Even right now, every Thursday, at least under Obama, just like under Bush, the son, every Thursday, then the CIA normally brings a paper, puts it before the president. These are the people we would like to use drone to assassinate, approve. And usually the president will pick up a pen and tick those that will be assassinated that week by drone. And the CIA will go ahead and do its job under national security grounds. So I don't think the Saudis have anything to fear from this exercise. No, nothing major will come out of the exercise.
All right, let's move to Africa. And one of the topics I would like to hear your views on is in Chad. And we're seeing this rather unique situation where the government is calling for an inclusive national dialogue with armed groups in that country. And when we start to talk about governments calling armed groups together, it suggests that they know who these armed groups are that are causing the destabilization. And what's your view, Prof, on this sort of narrative where governments say, bring all the armed groups together, let's sit down, let's discuss? What are your views on it?
It's nothing new, and especially in terms of Chad that you have mentioned, both as Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs and as Minister of External Affairs, I was involved in several conferences held held to bring together competing militia in Chad, at times with the central government itself, or institution where there's no central government among the militia factions. And there were, arising out of these conferences, Kukune Wadai became president until he was chased out of the presidential palace by Hissin Habre, who was then president of Chad, until he was chased out by another militia leader. And Hissin Habre is now cooling off his heels in a Senegalese prison, having been convicted of crimes against humanity. So, in a way, it is a recognition by the government of the day that it is not in total control of the territory. Two, it cannot, it lacks the capability to defeat the militia in a frontal military confrontation. And therefore, you then turn to diplomatic conferences, either in order to woo them, and it never works, because even if they accept to become part of the government, it's just to buy time, they will still pursue the objective of overthrowing that government. But it is a recognition that they are not in control of the country. It is you. I mean, it is like what is happening. It's like what is happening in Afghanistan. You know, the Taliban and the Afghan government are having talks in Dubai, in Doha. Why would the central government, be having talks with the Taliban, if not there's an admission that they cannot defeat the Taliban on the field?
If we move slightly uh, 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 down in Africa, we then start to see another event unfolding between the government and again militants in a certain part of the country. And that is going to Ethiopia, where we start to see the Tigrays are now saying that, hey, we're forming an alliance with other militant groups to go against the government. Should Addis Ababa, the government in Addis Ababa, be very worried about this type of development?
Very, very, very much. They should be worried. It doesn't bode well for stability in Addis Ababa. I still don't understand how the the Tigray Liberation Front, which had been basically defeated by a combination of the Ethiopian forces and the Eritrean forces, all of a sudden, overnight, had then been empowered suddenly, that they were able to drive the Ethiopian forces out of Tigray. And now, instead of stopping there, they are now moving into adjoining provinces, which are not inhabited by Tigris. And as you said in your question, they are now forming alliance with the Omoro liberation movement to now challenge the central government in Addis Ababa. It had become so critical when a central government now calls on all its able-bodied men who can pick up guns to pick up guns to help the central government fight these militias. It shows the level of panic that the central government is engaged in. What also bothers me, and even bothers me more, is this at a time when Ethiopia is engaged in a confrontation with two countries with military forces in Africa, Egypt and the Sudan, over the building of the Renaissance Dam over River Nile. It bodes ill for Ethiopia, a country that I love so much. I've been in Ethiopia so many times. Uh, I've seen some of the architectural, archaeological, uh, archaeological churches which date from the 13th century, carved out of stone, which are UNESCO. Uh, they've been
World
declared
Heritage Centers.
UNESCO. Is yes. If those centers are destroyed, civilization, human civilization, will have lost irreplaceable uh, um, things. So it's warning to me, and I think this is the time. This is the time. I wish that this was at a time when Nigeria was an activist foreign policy actor, because this is the time really when at the level of heads of states there should be some talking sense into the head of the government in Addis Ababa and those troops, trying to work out some guarantees while also intervening in the problem between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt over that something. There must be intervention at the level of heads of state and not just leave it to the African Union, who basically are technocrats without, the gravitas of political power. This is the time. This time calls for there calls for intervention at that level.
Thank you for that, Prof. I'm going to throw one last question to you. I know you've had a long day, but I'm going to throw this last question to
Yeah.
you. And this is the news from Sudan saying that they are handing over the ex president, Omar al Bashir, to the ICC. Um, what are your views on the handing over to ICC from Sudan?
Usually, that happens when the government of the day has come to a conclusion that putting him on trial in their own country will destabilize their country. It is not that Sudan doesn't have a judiciary, they do, but uh, the former president still has supporters. And the government does not want a civil war on its hand, or civil disobedience, or urban violence from his supporters. So it is just better to hand him over to ICC and let him take his chances there. This will not be the first time, of course, that that the president of a country will be sent to either the president or a former president will be sent to the ICC. It happened to Laurent Gbagbo of the Cote d'Ivoire. He was found not guilty and is back in Cote d'Ivoire now. It happened to Charles Taylor, former president of Liberia, and he's cooling off his heels in some prison, I don't know, in Europe, haven't been found guilty of crimes against humanity. This will be a lesson to African heads of states who, while they are in power, while they are sitting in presidential palaces and feeling comfortable and secure about committing all kinds of atrocities, this will be a lesson to them that no matter how long it takes, unless they die in office, the law will pursue them, and they may also end up in before the ICC. Because there are leaders in Africa, dictators in Africa with atrocious record of crimes against humanity and crimes against human rights. Still till today, there are. Tomorrow, they may find themselves in a cell at The Hague. So I'm not, it doesn't upset me the way it would have upset me, because I think I know where you are going. That is this good for African image? That is African leaders who are always being dragged before the ICC. I understand that. But at the same time, African leaders should know that the world has changed. They are no longer pharaohs with unlimited power to make and unmake their fellow human beings. And I think when I weigh those two things, I will tilt towards putting them on trial. I think Africa and Africans will be the better for it.
Thank you so much for your time this evening, Prof. Like I said, I know it's been a long day for you, but thank you so much for being here. And thank you to our viewers for joining us this evening. If you haven't clicked the subscribe button, please do so you get notified every time we go live on the program. And don't forget to share this links when we send the links out and when we go live. Thank you so much for being there. Once again, Prof, thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Peace.